Hello and welcome to our special program, a live TV marathon in support for Ukraine from Berlin studio. It is a special event we have prepared by the European Resilience Initiative Center and the Silicon Curtain video podcast with Jonathan. Thank you. We'll see him today too. And this will be an 8-hour event today with 5 stellar panels and a lot of interviews, which we have recorded extra for this show. And this event marks the 3rd year of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine and 11th year of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We'll have a lot of panels today. As I said, you can have a look into a time schedule in the description of this video. And the first panel is dedicated to the question, is the West's support to Ukraine is more words or deed? What is going with the West's support? I'm happy to welcome our first guest here, Aaron Gash-Barnett. He is a security expert and analyst. He's a journalist, a Canadian working in Berlin. He's also a co-host of Berlin Side Out, a podcast which he runs together with Dr. Benjamin Tallis from DGAP, a German Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you very much for having me, Sergey.
So look, we have a lot of events which happened this week, and in particular, another voting in Bundestag, no Taurus for Ukraine.
Yeah.
We have a speech or explanation of Federal Chancellor Scholz why it is not possible to send Taurus, and we had also President Joe Biden's address to the nation. We will address this topic later. And President Macron has developed his taste for being hawkish. So a lot of things.
Right.
So what is going on in the world? Do we finally found some deeds, or is it still the words?
Well, I think that's the big question at the moment. I mean, I think we finally see a French president who is interested in, as you say, more deeds as opposed to words, and to back up words with action. Of course, we could criticize the French president as well for words versus deeds, as the case may be. French support for Ukraine is really dwarfed by German support and by U.S. support in absolute terms, of course. So it will be interesting to see if Macron's really hawkish rhetoric, especially yesterday with that speech, is really matched up by action. But I think that obviously reflects a real impatience, particularly with Berlin, and also I think with Washington as well, that despite the amount of support that's been given by both Berlin and Washington to Ukraine, that we have leaders in those two capitals that really just don't get the strategic moment that we're in and don't get the scale of what is necessary. So it's very fine for Germany, for example, to say, as it often does, that it is the second largest supporter of Ukraine in terms of military aid, in terms of finances, in terms of in absolute terms, but there are very key things that are missing that Chancellor Olaf Scholz refuses to deliver. The biggest example, of course, of that is Taurus, which is the long-range cruise missile system that would actually allow Ukraine to hit certain very strategic targets, like the Kerch Bridge, for example, that connects Crimea with Russia at the moment, an illegally constructed bridge, of course, and would actually allow the Ukrainians to hit the supply lines of Russia.
Look, that is what I wanted to focus on. We have seen last year or end 22, early 23, a lot of international pressure on Chancellor Scholz.
Yes.
The Poles were very hawkish. They said, we will deliver Leopards 2 to Ukraine with or without German permission. The French said, we deliver tanks like wheeled tanks. The Brits said, we will deliver Challenger tanks.
Yes.
And then Scholz said, okay, like if you all deliver, I just join you.
Yes.
Do we have the same situation now? Can we say that the international pressure on Scholz has reached the level when he will say, okay, like I don't have room for retreat, I need to act because I'm forced to?
I think what really would make a difference maybe in this debate, or whether Chancellor Scholz actually decides to send Taurus, is whether the US would send ATACMS. these missiles. So we saw that was very much what happened with the whole Leopard tank debate. Chancellor Scholz wouldn't, he moved, I think, on Leopards for a number of different reasons. He moved, I think, because there was parliamentary pressure to do so. It took months, of course, and that's months that were wasted that could have had a difference on the battlefield in Ukraine, for example. We always have to remember this, that every day that there's a delay is a delay that the Ukrainians don't have the things that they need to have to be able to actually make gains, to actually push towards victory, and ultimately that costs lives, clearly. On this debate, I think, for Taurus, I think we have just about every possible source of pressure that you can have at the moment. It is a discussion, obviously, in German public debate, on talk shows, that sort of thing. We have parliamentary pressure. That's very clear from the, not simply from the opposition, from the Christian Democrats, but also from even within the coalition, certain members of the Greens and the Free Democrats, although I would argue that some of those parliamentarians could actually up that pressure quite a bit. But one place that we're not seeing that, we do see that pressure from Macron, obviously, who has felt the need to rebuke Olaf Scholz in public. We should note that that's very significant, because usually these kinds of rebukes would come from behind closed doors, diplomatically. You know, you'd shut the door and Macron might say to Scholz, "What are you doing? Like, why aren't you moving on this?" And now Macron is clearly so frustrated that he's rebuking Scholz in public to up the pressure as high as possible. Where we're not seeing pressure on Scholz that has worked before yet is from Washington, and I think that's one of the big questions.
That is what I wanted to dig a bit deeper in. We have seen, since October last year, we have seen 3 attempts by the oppositional party, Christian Democratic Union, to vote, to push the deputies of the ruling parties of three parties coalition, the Greens, Liberals, and Social Democrats, to vote, which is a non-binding vote. It's just like making a moral call for Scholz to deliver Taurus, and all these votes failed. The last failed like yesterday, this week. And you have been, I remember we recorded an interview with you after you have returned from the Munich Security Conference in February. And you said that behind the closed doors, there was some movement and there was some readiness to rethink and at least to discuss something, maybe to find a solution. And now we see that the fronts in the Chancellor's office are really consolidated, and they say no means no. So what has happened, and can Scholz face some sort of, I don't know, like some removal from his office?
I mean, that is the big question at the moment, whether we could ever see a no-confidence vote in Chancellor Scholz. Of course, we should note that under German constitutional order, this is quite difficult. It's in my home country, in Canada, or in the UK, for example, that's actually a lot easier to hold a no-confidence vote in the Prime Minister, in the government, this sort of thing. For that to be done here in Germany is more difficult, because you have to simultaneously designate a successor if you hold a no-confidence vote in the Chancellor. You can't simply hold that vote and not know who the next person is going to be. You need to know that right at the time. But I think that there is the Chancellor's office has always had a united front in this no, and the question is what his coalition partners are actually willing to do to be able to force his hand here. And ultimately, unless pressure comes from outside, from Washington, as I just said before, I think that we're at a moment, perhaps in German politics, where the only way to really potentially put pressure on the Chancellor's office is to start talking about no confidence. I don't know that we're necessarily going to see that. I think that we know that the Chancellor's office has put pressure on the other two parties in the government, the Greens and the Liberal Free Democrats, to basically say, if you vote against us in these Taurus motions, you are jeopardizing the coalition. And I think that makes these parties nervous, because German politics is, it's a political system that prizes stability. And no one wants to be seen as the one that's going to blow up the coalition. However, I think that we have to remember that there has been a successful vote of no confidence in Germany before. That happened in 1982. Interestingly enough, it was over the issue of missiles, American missiles in Germany. And so I don't know if we'll see history repeat itself, but ultimately, the other parties might worry that holding this no confidence vote based on a foreign policy